Hi, I'm John Hamlin and welcome to WakeTV. We've got a lot going on in Wake County, so stay tuned. Hi, I'm John Hamlin and I'm out today with Bianca Howard from our Solid Waste Management Division at Harris Lake County Park, where we're going to be demonstrating how to compost in your backyard. So out here at the park we have a few examples of how you can compost, including with the Earth Machine style bins that the county sells during its annual compost bin sale. So before we get started, I have just a few quick questions to make sure I'm ready to learn how to compost. First of all, if I want to compost, how much time am I looking at?
Composting can take as long or as little as you want to put into it. If you do nothing but add materials to your bin and keep it moist, you could have compost ready in about a year. If you want it ready sooner, just put a little more time into it and make sure that you get out there at least once a month to turn it. Okay,
so that's great. My next concern is it going to smell bad?
Well, no, not as long as you follow a few basic rules. We'll talk about some things you do want to put in your bin, as well as a few things you definitely want to leave out.
Okay, so that sounds easy enough. So now that I've decided it's time to start composting and I've got my bin assembled, where should I put it?
Well, there are a few things to keep in mind before you decide to place your Earth Machine. First, you want your bin close enough to your house that you can remember to go out and put things in it. Ideally, you'd want it close to a water source, such as a hose, so you can keep your bin moist. You also want to avoid full sun if you can. Where we are today is great. The bin has some shade so it doesn't dry out too much.
Okay.
And finally, you want to avoid any kind of obstructions that could prevent your bin from getting air. The Earth Machines come with ventilation slats, so you want to be sure that you're not too close to bushes or trees that could block those.
Okay, so how do I get started adding material?
Well, I like to start with about a 2-inch layer of twigs on the bottom. That helps to aerate your bin a little bit. And then you want to start layering greens and browns.
Okay, so tell me what you mean by greens and browns.
Well, browns are things that have a lot of carbon. Those are things that tend to be kind of dry and woody. So think about sticks, dry leaves, twigs, shredded paper, sawdust, shredded paper in very small amounts. Those are all things you could put in your bin that are considered browns. Greens are things that are rich in nitrogen, and those tend to be a little bit more wet. So those are things like grass clippings in small amounts, fruit and vegetable peels, also things like tea bags and coffee grounds. So things that are kind of wet and mushy.
Okay, so I did a little bit of reading about this before today, and I saw something about a C to N ratio, and that sounded technical.
Well, composting is a science, but it's also an art. So that stands for carbon to nitrogen ratio. But when we talk to people starting composting, we like to think about just volume. So try to have twice as much brown material as you do green material. So one of the best things you can do for yourself when you get started is don't just put in fruit and vegetable scraps, but try to balance it out with twice as much of those brown things. Things like the straw, the twigs, the dry leaves.
Okay, so now you've told me what we want to put in the bin. Is there anything that I need to leave out?
Yes, and don't feel like you have to memorize this. If you buy an Earth Machine, you get this great handbook, which has a list of things to avoid. So you never have to memorize it. It has everything you need to get started with your bin. So some of the key things to avoid are meat and dairy products. They might be a part of your diet, but they do not belong in your compost bin. Those things would break down eventually, but they don't break down fast enough in a backyard bin. They also might attract rats to your yard, which is something you probably don't want. So in addition to avoiding meat and dairy products, you also don't want to put in any really greasy or oily foods. When it comes to plants, think carefully about what you're doing to your own yard. Avoid putting in plants that you've treated with pesticides, as well as any weeds that have already gone to seed. Okay.
So do I need to chop things up before I put them in?
It can be helpful. So you want to make sure materials are not more than 2 to 6 inches in diameter. I like to use tools I already have. For me, my head shears are a great tool. I like the long blades, but don't feel like you have to go out and buy something. If you have pruners or loppers on hand, just use those. And that way you can break down any really long limbs or any really fat branches.
Okay, so are there any other tools we could use?
There are two more things that can be really helpful. In between trips to my compost bin, I like to have a container to keep my food scraps in. This one's really nice because this pail has holes that are large enough to let air through, but they're too small for fruit flies or other insects to get in. So I use this to store my fruit and vegetable scraps, as well as tea bags and coffee grounds. So any kind of pail or container with a tight fitting lid can be really helpful for your scraps. The second tool that I find really helpful is a turner. This one is nice because it's designed to aerate the bin. It slides really easily into the narrow opening of an earth machine. If you don't want to buy a turner, you could use something like a pitchfork, but that's a little bit harder to get through the opening of the earth machine. And turning the bin, John, is something that is helpful if you want your compost to be ready faster. That helps to mix the contents, it mixes the wet and the dry parts together, and introduces oxygen so the microbes can do the work for you.
Okay, so I heard you mention fruit flies when we were talking about the kitchen. Are there any other kinds of creepy crawlies we should be looking out for?
You should, and a healthy compost bin will become its own ecosystem. You can avoid fruit flies by always covering up your scraps. I like to use this small digging tool when I'm putting scraps in my bin. I always dig down into the bin a little bit and cover them up. And having a healthy supply of dry leaves or straw, those browns we talked about earlier, helps to bury your food scraps so that it's hard for fruit flies to find them. But a healthy bin sits on the ground and it's open to the soil, so organisms can come up and help break down your compost. So in a healthy compost bin, you should expect to see earthworms, beetles, and roly-polies. Those are all good signs of decomposers working to break down your waste.
Okay, so we've got a whole ecosystem going on in there. Does it need any water from time to time?
It does. So in order for your compost to break down quickly, you want to keep it about as moist as a wrung out sponge. One easy way to do that is to add water when you're adding food scraps. You could fill up the pail the rest of the way, or keep a watering can nearby, or make sure your bin is within reach of your hose so you can add water when necessary, especially during our hot, humid summers.
Okay, so I think I've got the process down. How long is it going to take until I have some finished compost?
Well, if you did, absolutely nothing except adding food scraps and brown materials without ever turning it, it would take your compost about a year to be ready. If you turn it more frequently, and if you build a batch all at once, when I say build a batch, I mean fill up your bin all at the same time, your compost could be ready in as little as 3 to 4 months. So again, it really goes back to how much time you want to invest and how quickly you need that compost for your garden.
Okay, so how will I know when it's finished?
Well, finished compost looks a lot like soil. It's dark brown to black and it's crumbly. It should have a nice earthy smell. It should not stink. Most importantly, you shouldn't recognize what you put into it. You might see an apple core, but you shouldn't see a whole apple or entire bits of food.
Okay, and so then once I've got this finished compost, what do you use it for?
There are a lot of great ways to use compost in your garden, and your composting handbook will remind you of some of those. One of my favorite ways is to use it in a potting mix, where I mix it with other soils, but you could also spread a layer of it on top of your garden, or you could really dig it into your soil if you're starting a brand new bed from scratch.
Okay, and plants love this stuff?
They do, and it can help you save money by not having to water your plants as often. And it can also just add some healthy nutrients to your soil, and that's really what healthy plants need. It all starts with healthy soil.
Well, that sounds great, Bianca. Thank you for teaching us how to compost today, and I look forward to getting started myself and hopefully keeping some extra trash out of the Wake County landfill.
My name is Tapushi Sarkar, and I work as security officer in the Wake County office building, Raleigh downtown. I call the Raleigh municipality as my home. I have lived in Wake County nearly 6 years. Well, Wake County is really my home. When I came to America, North Carolina, initially it was not very easy. I had to take the help of the nonprofits in Wake County, like the nonprofits like Interact, then Kiran, One of Us, and InStep. These are the 4 organizations which really helped me to get myself stabilized and help my daughter to continue her education and she's going to do her bachelor's finals in May. And so I am very indebted to Wake County. I am very much indebted to all these nonprofits. So how can I not love it? It is my home. Being counted in the Census 2020 is very important to me because the census is very important for America, and I am very lucky to be included in it.
Hey everyone! During this time of COVID, we've all spent a lot of time at home due to the restrictions that we put in place to keep everyone safe. However, that has given us all, I think, a greater appreciation for what it means to be outdoors in our public spaces, our open spaces, our greenways, our park system, all of that. Here to talk about it with us today is Chris Snow. He is the director of Wake County's Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Division. Welcome, Chris.
Good to be here.
We're glad to have you.
Yes.
And notice, everyone at home, we are sitting 6 feet apart, so we are socially distanced in this interview today.
We should be outside, though.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? I would love that. Well, speaking of being outside, tell us what is open and what is still closed within our parks and greenway systems.
Okay, so specifically for Wake County's parks, all of our parks and nature preserves are open. Our nature preserves are open 7 days a week now, which is, we just went to that schedule Memorial Day weekend, so we're really excited about that. And so all of our facilities are open. Now, some of the amenities in our parks are not open. The restrooms are still closed. Our educational centers are still closed. We are not taking shelter reservations or doing educational programming in the parks right now. But if you're looking for a place to get outside and go for a walk or fly a kite or throw a frisbee, then we've got your place. A number of the municipalities, the municipal parks are also open. Some of the individual facilities that people are looking for might not be open. So if you're thinking about heading out for a tennis match or a pickup game of basketball in one of the municipal parks, you might want to call and make sure those facilities are open.
That's a good tip. And I have been out to a bunch of our parks just trying to get a little sunshine, get out of the house with my family, my husband, and every time I'm there, there are always other people there. During the week, on the weekend, what kind of, population are you seeing out there? Has it really increased?
It has, especially at some of our larger facilities, more popular facilities, Harris Lake, the American Tobacco Trail, are seeing double the visitation that they saw this same time last year. Some of our parks are up over 50%. That includes like Crabtree. So a lot of our parks are really popular right now. And so lots of people visiting, trying to maintain social distancing, which is not always easy, especially on trails. But we are seeing a big uptick in visitation.
I'm not surprised. Plus, our parks are awesome, so why wouldn't everybody want to go there?
That's right.
But you said, reminding people to keep their social distance from each other. What other tips or guidance do you have for people to be health responsible when they're out at the parks and be respectful of other people? Because, it's not just about you, it's about everybody. So
social distancing is the biggest thing, just trying to maintain some distance between you or your family group. If you all came in the same car to the park, you don't necessarily need to stay 6 feet away from each other when you get to the park. And we understand that and respect that in family groups, but staying 6 feet away from another family or 6 feet away from individuals that you didn't come with is always the best way. We see people in our parks that are wearing masks, and that's a personal preference right now, as I understand it from the governor's order. You can wear them, you're not required to wear them. But we see a fair number of people with masks on. Folks have brought their own sanitizers, hand sanitizer or wipes, because our restrooms are not open. I will mention that some of the municipal restrooms have stayed open during this whole thing, the whole pandemic so far. So a number of parks have restrooms available. Wake County's are not open right now. And so bringing hand sanitizer or wipes is always a good play.
Yeah, always smart to be prepared.
Yes, yes.
Well, I want to talk about the programming that you all have in place. Your educational programming is always so good at the parks, and I know that you often have sellout crowds come and take part in the classes and the offerings that you provide.
Right.
But since you can't do that in person right now, you all have made a shift to virtual learning, and you've been very innovative. So tell us how that came about, how your staff came up with this idea.
And you hit it. It was all staff driven. These were, we have some very passionate people who work as educators in our park system. And they were looking for avenues, ways to still interact with our visitors. We have longtime visitors who have been coming to our parks for years, children who have grown up through our programs, and so our staff really wanted to find a way to engage with them. And I think one of the first things was a little video about a turtle that was a really big hit, and people were like, oh, we should do this for lots of other topics. And it just kind of started and snowballed, and we have videos and podcasts and virtual tours, and we have all kinds of activities, coloring pages and scavenger hunts, and it's all online, and so it's accessible to folks when we're not accessible as educators. You have stuff that you could either bring to the park, or you could do in your backyard, or you can do in your living room floor.
I love it. I saw the turtle video, and that's what got me so excited, and I immediately went home and showed my kids. And I don't think people think about how much wildlife you all see at the parks as your staff being out there all the time, and what kind of opportunity that is to introduce all of that wildlife safely to people who maybe don't feel comfortable going outside yet.
Yeah, and I mean, we have a number of animals in the parks that are captive animals for us that we use in our programs, and it's always neat to pull out a snake or a turtle, or go dip netting in a pond and actually see live animals and let the kids interact with them. But of course now we cannot do that, so the video is the next best thing.
I love it, and I love the activities that go along with it. You can go to the park system's website. The program is called Parks from Home, which is very clever, and you can search that on the website, Wake County's website, or on social media with the hashtag Wake Parks from Home, and you can find all of these great activities. So good, because I know you're a parent, I'm a parent. It's hard to keep your kids engaged, and they have online school, but sometimes you need something to keep them interested.
Right.
Have you heard that a lot from parents?
We have. You mentioned the online school. Normally this spring would have been very busy with us for field trips, school groups coming to the parks, and now that's not an option. And so some educators have turned to us and are using our little activity sheets and little videos. But it's always neat to be able to engage with the visitors, and now from 6 feet or 6 miles. We're virtual, so.
That's right. Another cool thing that you all are doing, which I love, is the Goat Pen Pal program. You've got to tell us about this.
So Historic Oakview has had goats for many years, and they are a big hit. As you can imagine, folks come to the park just to see the goats, and lots of pictures taken with the goats, and so lots of interaction with the goats, and nowadays that's limited in a lot of regards, and so staff started a pen pal program with the goats, and so you can write the goats and they will write you back, and so you can check in on them and see how they're doing, and they can check in on you and see how you're doing.
We have actually had a success story in our own office with this. One of our employees sent, her son sent a letter. He's only 3, so it was more like a picture, to the goats, and Felix the goat wrote him a whole page letter back.
There you go. Felix is good like that.
I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah.
So we were talking about engagement. The Backyard Buddies program is another great way that you all are engaging with the community during this time when everybody's kind of stuck at home.
Right.
Tell us about how the program works.
So basically, as the name implies, it's your backyard. And the things you hear or see in your backyard, you can share pictures or information via social media with everyone using the hashtag MyBackyardBuddies, and we are sharing what we're seeing in the parks that way, and so it gives you an idea of the animals that we're seeing or that you're seeing in your backyard, what wildflowers are blooming now, just whatever you want to share from a natural resources, natural history kind of themed. So we've had a lot of participation.
I think it's great, and it's so fun to see the kids who, have their little tiny hands with a snail or a frog or something like that, getting them up close and comfortable with nature in a whole new way. It's really
it's
fun.
A great time. Springtime, there's lots of things out right now, and so there are lots of good pictures.
Oh, absolutely. And we love that you're sharing them on social media. You mentioned earlier the virtual tours that you have for some of your parks and preserves. Tell us what people can get out of those that maybe they couldn't get just by walking through one of the parks or preserves.
So one of the great things about the virtual tours is that they can provide a little more detail, a little more background about where you are, about why it's special, about some unique plant or animal or wildlife habitat, and if you think about it, it is a virtual tour. You get an overview map kind of thing, and there are stops along the way, and at stop 1 you may learn about this aspect of the park, or stop 2 you may learn about another aspect of the park or preserve, and so it just kind of walks you through step by step and gives you that kind of back detail that you might not have gotten if you were there by yourself. If you were there with a staff, of course you could always ask, but that's not always the case nowadays, so it just gives you that background, that depth.
And it's easy to do on your phone.
Very much so.
Awesome.
Very much so.
I love that you all make the park so accessible for everyone.
We're trying really hard.
Well, you do a great job. So I was thinking today as I was preparing for this interview that your staff must be feeling a little bit blue during this time, these folks who are used to teaching and being out and amongst people and showcasing everything that's so great about your park system.
Right.
They can't really do that as well. I'm sure they're looking forward to getting back to the time when they can.
I think they are. Nobody knows what the new normal is going to be. Normal is normal. So we'll see what that looks like in the future. Most people don't go into the Parks and Rec profession because they want to sit in a cubicle and not see anybody. We usually like to interact with people and get out and share our knowledge and our passion about the out of doors. And so I think staff from that perspective are really looking forward to getting back. But being able to do it safely, you always have to take into account staff and their health, the visitors' health, the health of the goats. We want to protect everybody, and so I think when we can do that safely, I can expect staff to come roaring back and being out there just like they've always been.
Absolutely. You've got a great team, for sure.
I think so.
So, any idea when the roaring back might come? I know that's sort of the $1 million question for everyone. It's hard to say. So, we didn't get into this overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. We have a phased reopening plan that we have submitted to the county manager's office for review. It kind of backs us out of the restrictions that we put in place when all this started. It seems like years ago, but it's only been a few months. But as you can imagine, the more personal interactions like the programs will be some of the last things that come back. And that's provided, of course, the trends that the state monitors and that the county monitors on the lessening of the severity of the pandemic. Those keep headed in the right direction. People are always worried about another spike or another a fallback, and we're prepared for that, and we'll just slow our reopening plan. But right now, it'll probably be mid-July before you start seeing programs come back, and they'll be restricted. They'll be limited in size. We won't be doing programs for 30 or 40 kids at a time. It'll probably be more like 10 or 12. They will probably be held outdoors. We probably won't be using our classrooms right off the bat. And so it will be somewhat restricted, but we hope to be back into programming in another month
month or a month and a half.
There's so many different things that you can do at your parks. Do you have any advice for people who are just looking for a place to go and take a breath? You know, is it walking? Is it paddling? Is it all of the above that you would recommend them trying to do to just kind of ease some of the stress that comes along with dealing with this unprecedented global pandemic?
Right. So I think people are interested in different things, and some people just like to go for a walk, and some people really like to are looking for exercise, and so they may be out on their mountain bike or out paddling a canoe or a kayak. So there are lots of things to do in our parks, even though a number of our facilities are closed. You know, our open play fields are still open, and while we can't host team sports of any kind, if you wanted to throw a frisbee or fly kite, you know, those things are available. Our trails are available, both our hiking trails and our mountain biking trails. We have a number of places like Crabtree, Robertson Mill Pond, where you can take your own canoe or kayak. Right now, our boat rentals are not open right now, but hopefully soon. So I think people have to find what they're interested in, or what their family members are interested in, or get out there and try something completely new, you know, and just get outside.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll have some nice days of sunshine,
yes,
and they can get out there and do just that.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for coming in and talking to us today.
Always.
We love your
always.
park system.
Yeah,
And
well, I enjoy talking about our park system. So.
it's something good to brag about, for
Yes.
sure. And we thank all of you for joining us today, too. We hope you'll go to our website, wakegov.com/parks, and learn more about all of our wonderful open spaces, parks, and greenways here in Wake County.
I am Angela Gutierrez, and I am a full-time student at St. Augustine's University. I have lived in Wake County for about 3 years. The reason that I love calling Wake County home is the diversity and the resources that are here for me. Me not being from this country, I needed something here that would make me feel comfortable and something that would help me adjust. And just finding all those things here in Wake County, things that I can go to, just made it my transition from Honduras to here smoother. Being counted by the census is important to me because that way I can have a voice and I can represent my community, which is the Hispanic Latino community. And we need to be represented because through the census, you can get a count of the people that live in the United States, and you can get the proper information about those people. And then you can get the proper funding and the resources that you need to live comfortably and in a good way here in the United States and as well Wake County.
That's all for this episode of Wake TV. Keep up with the latest Wake County news by visiting us online at wakegov.com/news. And be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube so you can always stay in the loop. We'll see you next time.